And so I'm just going to let you have a turn at answering this question, because Monique and I, we get this all the time. So I would love to hear your answer to this question. How do I talk about worldview differences, but not upset anyone?
The dominant worldview of everything surrounding us really is secularism. And that's what I'm fleshing out in this book, is talking about the fact that secularism ultimately is an umbrella worldview where everyone comes back to the authority of the self. So for Christians with a biblical worldview, we see God as our ultimate authority, and he has revealed himself and what is true about reality in the Bible. So the Bible is our authority for much knowledge. However, for the secular world, when you take away that authority of God and the authority of any kind of revelation of God, you're not left with no authority at all. You're left with the authority of the self. It comes back to you. So secularism includes all kinds of beliefs that people can have about whether or not God exists, and whether or not you can pray to a God who may exist, and what's right and wrong. People are going to have a lot of disagreements about that. But the commonality, the tie that functionally binds the worldviews of millions of people, is that the authority on all of that is you personally. And that is where we are at fundamental odds with culture today. It's the authority of the self versus the authority of God and his word.
I think that's really important, because you're setting out that contrast really well between, the biblical worldview and this version of secularism, secular humanism. We get a lot of letters from people who follow the ministry, and maybe you get your fair share of these kind of letters too, of, I see this clash of worldviews. I'm struggling to have this very hard conversation with somebody at my church, my small group leader, my pastor, my friend over coffee. I want to have this, what I call the super hard, complicated discussion about an issue where I know the worldviews are probably going to come into play. How can I do that without making anybody upset? And we get this question, some version of this question, at every single outreach that we do. And so I'm just going to let you have a turn at answering this question, because Monique and I, we get this all the time. So I would love to hear your answer to this question. How do I talk about worldview differences, but not upset anyone?
Well, the goal is not to not make people upset.
Amen.
Let's just start with the right goal in mind and the right expectation, really. And I think that is an unfortunate, that's an influence of secularism right there. If as Christians, we are concerned about how to talk to people without making them feel upset, then we have embraced secularism without even realizing it. So in the book, I talk about these 4 tenets of secularism being: feelings are the ultimate guide, happiness is the ultimate goal, judging is the ultimate sin, and God is the ultimate guess. In other words, no one can be confident of anything about God in terms of knowledge. Well, if you take that and you think about, what that means from secular perspective about feelings being the ultimate guide, we've embraced that as Christians, and we think that we need to make sure that we are not making anyone feel bad when we are discussing these things with them. Now, we don't want people to feel bad. I'm not saying let's set out with that as our goal. However, we cannot control how people respond to the truth that we share. We can only control how we deliver it. And so I think this is where Christians are having a lot of trouble, because they're starting to believe that whether or not they should share truth depends on how someone will respond. And if they go into that difficult situation, maybe they felt hesitant in the first place, and they go into that situation and they try to talk about these issues, even if they're doing it with truth and grace, if the person gets upset, they think they've done something wrong. And I think we have to really catch ourselves and get out of that mentality. Now, we do always have to check our hearts, make sure we're coming from the right place. Is there always a better way that we can do things, and we can work on that, and we can always be introspective? Yes, of course. I'm not saying that just totally alleviates us of all responsibility and communication, but I'm saying that by the grace of God, we need to go forward, still speaking truth, knowing we're not responsible for how people respond. Don't go into anything thinking, how can I not make them upset? Go into it thinking, how do I deliver this truth in a God glorifying way for all the right reasons such that they can come to a saving knowledge of Him?